$5. That is all Elena Morales possessed at 3:52 in the morning on a rain-soaked stretch of Roosevelt Avenue in Chicago, and the universe had just made her decision for her. The black SUV came first as a sound, an engine screaming like something dying, metal on concrete, glass shattering across wet asphalt. Elena's hands gripped the steering wheel of her rusted Honda Civic as the SUV flipped once, twice, 3 times in her headlights, each rotation slower than the last, until it slammed sideways into a concrete barrier with a force that crumpled the vehicle like aluminum foil. Orange and yellow flames erupted from the undercarriage, climbing toward the sky, consuming the darkness with heat so intense that Elena could feel it pressing against her windshield from 50 yards away. She sat frozen. Every thought screamed at her to drive past, to go home to her empty apartment, to count those 5 crumpled dollar bills one more time and figure out which of her 3 debts to ignore first. The sirens were already wailing somewhere in the distance. Someone else would stop. Someone with insurance, with a phone that worked, with a life that was not already hanging by a thread. Elena pulled over. Her orthopedic shoes, the ones with the special insoles her podiatrist had prescribed 2 years ago before she ran out of money for appointments, splashed through puddles as she ran toward the wreck. The diner apron was still tied around her waist, still stained with coffee grounds and spilled cream from the double shift she had just finished. The heat from the burning vehicle seared her face like an open oven. She smelled burning rubber, gasoline, something worse underneath it all, something like flesh beginning to char. The driver's side door was jammed. She yanked at the handle with both hands, the metal scorching her palms, raising blisters that would ache for weeks. The door gave way. Inside, a man lay unconscious, expensive tailored suit torn at the shoulder, blood streaming from his temple where he had hit the side window. His gold watch caught the firelight and glowed like a small sun against his wrist. She grabbed his shoulders and pulled. He was heavy, not from fat but from the kind of muscle that comes from purpose, from someone whose body was built to do serious things. His head lolled back as she dragged him across the console and out through the open door. The moment his feet cleared the vehicle, the interior exploded in a bloom of orange flame. The back seat ignited. The ceiling collapsed. Elena fell backward on the wet pavement, still gripping his suit jacket, coughing, her hand screaming with pain. She lay there in the rain, breathing in great heaving gulps, her one good eye fixed on the burning wreck, watching the flames consume what she had just saved him from. His eyes opened. They were dark, not brown but something deeper, like looking down into a well at midnight. Even through the pain, even covered in blood, his gaze was calculating, measuring, searching her face with the intensity of someone cataloging a threat or an asset. He stared at her for 3 seconds, 5, 10. She stared back. In that moment, he could see everything. The swollen left eye, purple fading to yellow at the edges from an injury older than a week. The handprints on her throat, still visible as dark bruises, each finger clearly defined. The split lip, partially scabbed over. The exhaustion that lived in her bones so deeply that her skeletal structure had rearranged itself around it. He whispered one word. "Why?" Elena had no answer. She did not know why she had stopped. She did not know why her body had moved toward danger instead of away from it. She did not know that this single moment, this choice made at 3:52 in the morning in a rainstorm on Roosevelt Avenue, would dismantle her poverty, destroy her enemies, and change the trajectory of her entire remaining life. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights began painting the street. Vincent Vitoli, the man with the dark eyes and the gold watch and the tailored suit that cost more than Elena's annual rent, closed his eyes and lost consciousness again. But before he did, something shifted in his chest. Something cold and dangerous and utterly unfamiliar stirred behind his ribs. But what she did not know was this: Vincent Vitoli never forgot a face. Never forgot a debt. Never left a sacrifice unpaid. And the 15 men he would send to her apartment in 30 minutes were not coming to threaten her. They were coming to tell her that everything she owed, everything that had been taken from her, everything that had bent her spine and swollen her eye and left handprints on her throat was about to be repaid in full. Before we continue, drop a like if this already has you hooked. Share it with someone who believes that courage matters, and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. Now, let us rewind. Let us go back 6 hours earlier, to a diner on the south side where a woman counted coins at a register and wondered if she would still have a home in 5 days. The checkered floor of the Nightingale diner was black and white and permanently stained with the residue of 10,000 shifts. Elena Morales wiped down table 7 with a cloth that had stopped being white somewhere around 2015, moving with the mechanical precision of someone whose body knew this rhythm so completely that her mind could separate from it entirely. Count the bills. Multiply by her hourly wage. Subtract the rent that Hargrove was going to demand, the one that kept rising because he measured it in favors now, in things he wanted from her that made her skin crawl. It was 3:22 in the morning, and the diner was empty except for Maurice, the night cook, who was smoking a cigarette in the back and listening to jazz on a speaker that had not been new since the Clinton administration. The rain hammered against the windows with a rhythm that sounded almost musical, almost like it meant something. Elena's fingers worked through the bills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. $5. That was the tip from table 3, the businessman in the wool overcoat who had ordered eggs and toast and spent 2 hours on his laptop without looking at her once. She had refilled his coffee 7 times. 7. She had cleared his plate without him acknowledging her existence. And when he left, he placed $5 on the table like a parent leaving an allowance. $5 standing between her and eviction in 5 days. $47,000 owed to Robert Hargrove, the landlord who measured rent in favors and threats. 5 days until he changed the locks on the apartment where her nephew Marcus had drawn a picture of a family that did not exist, a mother and father standing side by side with their arms touching, something Elena had never experienced and had no way of explaining to a child how she could not give him. She placed the $5 in her apron pocket and felt the weight of it like it was made of lead instead of paper. The diner's bell chimed. Elena did not look up. "We are closing," she said, moving toward the back booth where the coffee station lived, where the mugs hung like a forest of white ceramic and regret. "I know you are." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady like something built to last. Elena turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the streetlights outside. He was tall, at least 6'2", with a broad chest that filled the space beneath an expensive charcoal coat. His hair was dark, silvered at the temples, and his face carried the kind of quiet power that made the room seem to shrink around him. He was not young. Maybe 50, maybe older. His age was irrelevant. What mattered was the way he held himself, like a man accustomed to people moving out of his way. He was not alone. 2 other men stood behind him, younger, wearing suits that fit like second skin. Elena's muscles went rigid. She recognized the pattern. This was what happened in neighborhoods like hers, at hours like this, to women who owed money to the wrong people. "We do not have cash in the register," she said, which was true. She had $17 in the till, and if these men took it, she would actually go backward. The man took off his coat and hung it carefully on the back of a booth seat, revealing an open white shirt beneath a tailored charcoal jacket, his chest broad and scarred. He sat down at table 5 without asking permission. "Coffee," he said. "Black. 2 sugars." It was not a request. Elena moved toward the coffee station, her hand shaking only slightly. She poured the coffee with the precision of someone who had done this 8,000 times, who could do it in complete darkness if necessary, and placed it in front of him. His hand was large, with a gold ring on his left pinky and a diamond-faced watch that probably cost more than her rent for 6 months. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elena." "Elena what?" "Morales." He nodded slowly, as if her name confirmed something he already knew. As if her existence had been confirmed by an invisible record somewhere, and now he was simply putting a face to the documentation. "You work here every night, Elena Morales." 5 nights a week. "And the money they give you for that work?" "How much?" She did not answer. But he could see the answer in the way her shoulders curved inward, in the way her eyes moved to the floor. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a card. It was cream-colored, expensive stock, with a single name embossed in gold lettering, Vincent Vitoli. Below it, nothing else. No business, no title, no explanation of who he was or why his name deserved to exist on cardstock that probably cost more than Elena's shoes. "If anyone hurts you again," he said, his dark eyes moving across her throat, her swollen eye, her split lip, "you call this number. You do not call the police. You do not tell anyone. You call this number, and you tell whoever answers that Vincent says someone has made a mistake. Do you understand?" Elena took the card with trembling fingers. She understood that she did not understand anything. She understood that the universe was a place where random men appeared in diners at 3:02 in the morning and made offers that sounded like threats and felt like salvation. "Why would you?" she began. "Because," Vincent said, lifting the coffee to his lips, "the people who did this to you believed you were nobody. That belief needs to be corrected." He drank the coffee in 3 long swallows and stood up. He placed a $100 bill on the table, $100, an entire week of tips, an actual week, and turned toward the door where his men were waiting. At the threshold, he paused without looking back. "Your nephew," he said. "Marcus. He draws pictures." Elena's blood stopped moving. She did not remember telling anyone about Marcus. She did not remember speaking his name aloud to a single person outside the building where they lived. "One of them is very good," Vincent continued, still not turning around. "A family. Mother. Father. Child. It is a picture of something that does not exist yet, Elena Morales. But it will. You will make sure of that." He walked out into the rain. Elena stood frozen in the diner, the card burning in her palm, the $100 bill floating on the table like a promise or a curse. She did not know that Vincent Vitoli had just been pulled from a burning car exactly 1 hour and 30 minutes earlier. She did not know that he had spent those 90 minutes having his wound cleaned, having x-rays taken, having doctors tell him that another minute inside that vehicle and he would have been ash. She did not know that he had gotten the name of his rescuer from a security camera footage that had been reviewed by Marco, his lieutenant, who had brought him the information as soon as Vincent woke up in the hospital. She did not know any of this. But in 30 minutes, when Carlo and Gino knocked on her apartment door with orders from Vincent himself, she would finally understand that some debts are measured in blood, and some rescues change everything. The rain hammered against the diner windows like something trying to get in. The rain hammered against the diner windows like something trying to get in, each drop a tiny fist demanding entry. Elena Morales stood behind the counter at Rose's diner, her reflection ghostly in the chrome napkin dispenser, and counted the tips for the 3rd time that night. $23.40. She arranged the bills in a small, sad stack on the register, her fingers trembling slightly. $23.40 to her name until Friday, when the register would ring again and Jerry would hand her another pathetic envelope of coins that strangers had deemed her worth. She was 34 years old. Her mirror told her she looked 44. Dark hair pulled back so tightly it gave her a permanent headache, eyes that had been beautiful once before exhaustion learned to live there permanently, orthopedic shoes squeaking against the black and white checkered linoleum floor, cracked in 17 places, she had counted. The floor of Rose's was a map of damage. Her feet were another kind of map, and Oliver's school supplies were another, and the eviction notice taped to her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a dancing tomato was perhaps the cruelest map of all. $5 left after bus fare home. $5 standing between her and absolute zero. Oliver needed milk money for school. The bus home cost $2.50. That left $2.50, which was not enough for bread, which meant tomorrow morning she would give Oliver cereal without milk and tell him it tasted better that way, the way mothers do when they have learned the mathematics of survival. $5. The words echoed in her head with the rhythm of the rain. $5, $5, $5. And Robert Hargrove owned her building. Robert Hargrove, who had bought the South Side properties like a man collecting baseball cards, who wore expensive jackets over work boots like a costume designed to terrify, who measured rent in favors and threats and things that could never be spoken aloud. $47,000, he had said 3 weeks ago. That was the new rent structure. $47,000 in 5 days, or she could start packing. 5 days from tonight would be Friday at midnight. The clock was a living thing, ticking toward her destruction. She wiped down the counter for the third time, the rag moving in circles that never actually cleaned anything, just rearranged the ghosts of spilled coffee and burnt toast and the everyday residue of people who had somewhere else to be. The neon open sign flickered pink and blue, casting her face in alternating colors of hope and despair. At 11:30 at night, Roses held only 2 truckers in the far booth, a drunk man nursing black coffee, and the weight of Elena's impossibilities. The diner smelled like it always did. Like stale coffee and grease that had learned to live in the walls, like old vinyl chairs and the particular exhaustion of service work. Like survival on credit. Like the last place left when everywhere else had closed its doors. At 10:15 p.m., the bell above the door chimed, a small, bright sound that made Elena's stomach drop. Robert Hargrove stepped inside, rain dripping from his expensive jacket. Mid-50s, the kind of handsome that cruelty had not yet destroyed, though it was working on the project. He owned 14 buildings. 14. He smiled when he saw her, and the smile was exactly like a blade wrapped in ice. Elena. He said her name like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. You got my money. She turned from the espresso machine. The cup in her hand trembled. Mr. Hargrove, can we talk about this? I need a few more days. My shift here, and I picked up extra hours at the nursing home on Tuesdays, and time. He moved closer, and the air between them changed. Became smaller. Became dangerous. I gave you time, Elena. I gave you 3 months of time. Now you give me something else, or you're on the street. Friday. You understand? Friday midnight. She said nothing. When you have nothing to say, silence is the only honest thing left. His hand came up to her throat, and the world became very simple and very clear. Very small and very painful. He pressed her against the wall between the storage room and the register, his fingers wrapped around her neck like he was testing to see if she would break. She could feel her pulse jumping against his palm. Could smell the whiskey on his breath, sharp and suffocating. You understand, he repeated. She managed a nod. Her eyes watered. Good. There's a place on Halstead Street. Hotel, 2nd floor, room 214. You come Friday night with my money, or you come Friday night without it and we discuss an alternative payment plan. His fingers traced her jawline, moving slowly, deliberately. Your choice, Elena. But you will pay me. He released her. She collapsed against the wall, her hand flying to her throat where his handprints already throbbed like a second heartbeat. He walked back toward the door, paused, looked at her one more time with that terrible smile, and disappeared into the November rain. The bell chimed again, bright and merciless. Jerry, who had been pretending to stock coffee cups, continued pretending. He would not look at her. In the diner, there were unwritten rules about the things you witnessed and the things you never spoke of. Elena slid down the wall until she was sitting on the linoleum, her orthopedic shoes stretched out in front of her. She touched her throat, and her fingers came away wet. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 8 years ago, heading toward Chicago, heading toward this exact moment, heading toward a future where $5 meant the difference between survival and the street. The rain hammered the windows. At that same hour, 3 miles away across Chicago, Vincent Vitoli was about to discover a betrayal that would change everything. The restaurant was called Vitoli's, and it occupied the entire bottom floor of a building that Vincent owned. Darkwood, red leather booths, a kitchen that produced food so good people drove across the city for it, and in a private room in the back, Vincent Vitoli sat across from his own brother Marco, with Enzo and Carlo positioned near the door like stone statues in expensive suits. Vincent was 51 years old and looked carved from something that predated mercy. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair silvered at the temples, his eyes the grey of a storm that knew how to hold still. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a debt collected 15 years ago. He wore a white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and a gold watch that cost more than most people's cars. When he moved with the kind of control that suggested he had spent decades learning exactly how much damage a human body could cause. He was looking at Marco the way a man looks at his entire world just before it collapses. How long? Vincent's voice was deep and solid like an oath. Marco was sweating. Marco was begging without words, his body in the posture of a man who understood he was already dead, was simply negotiating the terms of his funeral. Vincent, listen. How long have you been selling our routes to the Castellanos? 3 months. Just 3 months. I was in debt, I was. To who? To Evelyn Blackwell's people. She had loaned me. Vincent raised one hand, a single gesture, and the rest of Marco's sentence died in his throat. The gold watch caught the light when he moved. Enzo shifted slightly. Carlo remained motionless. You are my brother, Vincent said. His voice did not rise. That is why you get 10 minutes to run. Not 5. Not 1. 10. You take the car in the garage. You drive east. You do not stop. You do not call anyone. You do not come back to Chicago. In 10 minutes, I am calling the Castellanos to inform them that their source has dried up. In 10 minutes and 1 second, I am calling every family in the city. By the time you reach the state line, there will be a bounty on your head that the devil himself would feel compelled to collect. Marco stood up. His chair fell backward. He was crying now, the way men cry when they have destroyed everything. Go, Vincent said. Marco went. He ran past Enzo and Carlo and out into the November rain, and Vincent Vitoli sat in the red leather booth, looking at the place where his brother had been, understanding that some betrayals cut so deep that no amount of blood could wash them clean. He did not cry. He never cried. But something cold and dangerous stirred in his chest, and he reached for his phone. Marco has given our routes to the Castellanos, he said when Enzo answered. Find them. Tonight. I want to know everything he told them, and I want to know where they are moving the shipment. We move at midnight. He hung up. Carlo was watching him with the careful expression of a man who had worked for Vincent for 15 years and understood that this was the moment when everything changed. This was the moment when Vincent Vitoli stopped being a businessman and became what he had spent 15 years trying not to be. Call everyone in, Vincent said. All of them. We have a war to fight. Outside, the November rain fell like a curse, and neither Vincent Vitoli nor Elena Morales knew that in exactly 90 minutes, their lives would collide on Roosevelt Avenue, and that $5 and a burning car would change everything. The apartment was one room, and it held everything Elena Morales owned in the world. The radiator clanked in the corner like a dying animal, spitting warmth that never quite reached the far wall where the air mattress lay deflated on the floor. Peeling wallpaper hung in strips from the plaster, showing decades of lives lived in poverty beneath it. A single window faced the alley. Rain hammered against it at 1:45 in the morning. Elena pushed through the door, her body moving like it belonged to someone else. Every muscle screamed. Her hands were blistered raw from pulling Vincent Vitoli from that burning car on Roosevelt Avenue, and her face throbbed where the Castellano soldier had backhanded her across the diner booth. She had not eaten. She had not slept. Mrs. Chen sat in the plastic folding chair by Oliver's side, her weathered hands folded in her lap. The old woman looked up, taking in Elena's torn uniform, her split lip, the way she limped like one of her legs didn't quite work anymore. He was very good tonight, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Ate the rice. Drew pictures for 2 hours. Elena reached for her apron pocket with trembling fingers. 5 crumpled dollar bills. That was all she had in the world. She pressed them into Mrs. Chen's calloused palm. I'm so sorry I'm late. The double shift ran long. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mrs. Chen looked at the bills, then at Elena's face, and said nothing. Some silences held more kindness than words ever could. The old woman gathered her cardigan and left without another sound, leaving Elena alone with the sleeping boy. Oliver lay on the floor surrounded by crayon shavings, his small body curled like a question mark. Elena knelt beside him, every joint protesting. She reached out and stroked his hair, dark like his father's, soft like a prayer. The drawing lay beside him. A family holding hands. A woman, a man, and a child. The same drawing he'd made last week and the week before. Families that existed only in a 7-year-old's desperate imagination. Elena folded it carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket, pressing it against her heart. "Not tonight, baby," she whispered. "I can't be all things tonight." The clock on the wall said 2:15 a.m. She had 30 minutes to shower, change, and return to the diner for the graveyard shift. Another 4 hours on her feet. Jerry had begged her to cover it, $40 in cash at the end of the shift. $40 meant she could buy Oliver's school supplies. $40 meant she could eat something besides day-old pastries from the garbage bins behind the bakery. $40 meant she could stay alive a little longer. The diner sat on the corner of Roosevelt and Halsted, a chrome and red vinyl monument to better times. The neon sign that read Rosselli's flickered like a dying pulse. Rain fell in sheets at 2:44 a.m. when the first SUV pulled up outside. 3 men climbed out. Black suits that cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Hard faces that had seen things that broke the soft parts of human beings. They moved with the practiced coordination of men who hurt people for a living. The lead man was named Frankie. 38, scar running from his eye to his jaw, gold chain visible beneath his open shirt. Behind him came 2 younger soldiers, both broad-shouldered and empty-eyed. Between them, they dragged a teenage boy, maybe 16, bleeding from his nose, terror radiating from him like heat from a furnace. "Nobody sees nothing," Frankie said to the empty diner. "Nobody says nothing." 2 truckers who had been nursing coffee for hours stood up immediately and walked out into the rain without finishing their cups. Jerry, the cook, disappeared into the back storage room like smoke. Elena was wiping down the counter by the kitchen. She watched the men shove the boy toward the grill, watched him slam against the hot metal. He cried out, a sound like an animal in a trap. "Please," the boy gasped. "Please, I don't know anything." Frankie grabbed him by the hair and slammed his forehead into the counter. Blood. So much blood. The boy's eye swelled shut in seconds. One of the younger soldiers pulled a knife, 6 inches of silver that caught the fluorescent light like a tooth. He pressed it against the boy's throat. Elena's hand stopped moving. The dish rag fell from her fingers. She did not think. She did not calculate odds or consequences or what $5 meant to a woman in a desperate situation. She simply moved, stepping forward until she stood between the knife and the boy's throat. "Stop," she said. Her voice shook. Her body did not. Frankie laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. "You got a death wish, waitress." Elena spread her arms wide, blocking the boy completely. "He's a child." "Not my problem." Frankie's hand came up like a hammer, and she saw it coming but did not move. His palm connected with her face, and her world became a white flash of pain. She crashed backward into the nearest booth, her head slamming against the vinyl seat. Her lips split. Warm blood filled her mouth. But she got up. Her legs were moving before her brain caught up. Blood dripped down her chin. Every nerve screamed at her to stay down, to let this happen, to be invisible like she had been invisible for so long. She stood again. "Move," she said to Frankie, her voice barely a whisper. "Move, or I'm calling the police." It was a desperate bluff. The police would not come for a waitress. The police would come, if they came at all, as executioners. Frankie pulled his fist back to hit her again. But something happened in that moment. A car pulled up outside. Through the rain-streaked window, a man emerged from the darkness. Carlo and Gino were with Vincent in the back seat when he saw the diner. He had needed coffee. He had needed to think about Marco's betrayal, about what came next, about how to wage war without losing his soul. He was not supposed to be anywhere near Roosevelt Avenue. But through the rain, through the neon, he saw her. The waitress with one eye swollen shut, standing in front of an armed man with her arms spread wide like she was trying to block out the entire world. "Drive closer," Vincent said. Carlo obeyed without question. The car rolled slowly through the rain. Gino leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "Boss, there's—" "I know," Vincent said. She absorbed another hit. He watched her fall and rise like something that could not be broken because it had no more pieces left to shatter. Her orthopedic shoes scraped against the checkered floor. Her stained apron hung loose on her thin frame. Something cold and dangerous stirred in Vincent Vitoli's chest. The boy broke free suddenly, running toward the back of the diner. The Castellano men cursed and chased him, abandoning the waitress on the floor. Vincent watched her collapse, watched her breathing come ragged, watched her close her eyes. "What do you want us to do, boss?" Gino asked. Vincent stared at the broken woman on the checkered floor. At her hands, already scarred from work. At her uniform, already torn. At the absolute refusal to move in her body even when everything told her to surrender. Vincent said one word: everything. The rain did not stop. It fell like a prophecy, like a curse, like a message written in a language only they understood. Elena left the diner at 3:22 a.m., moving through the November darkness like a ghost. $40 in her pocket. Her hands wrapped in bandages Jerry had given her from the first aid kit. Her mind somewhere far away where pain could not follow her. The rain soaked through her thin jacket. She did not feel cold anymore. Cold was a luxury for people who had choices. At 3:52 a.m., as she cut through Roosevelt Avenue on her way home, she saw the car. It had crashed into the median, metal twisted like screaming. Smoke poured from the engine. Through the windshield, she could see a man trapped inside, conscious, his hand pressed against the glass. She ran toward it. The metal was hot enough to blister. She didn't notice. She pulled at the door handle until her hands bled. She broke the window with a piece of debris and reached in, her fingers finding fabric, finding an arm, finding a man who smelled like cedar and expensive cologne even as death tried to collect him. She pulled. Her hands burned. Her muscles screamed. Something inside her chest cracked open like an egg. She pulled him from the fire. He collapsed on the wet street, gasping. Rain fell on his face. Blood ran from a cut on his temple. His ribs heaved with the effort of breathing. "You're alive," Elena whispered. "You're alive. Stay with me. Stay with me." And the man looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his storm-gray eyes shifted. By 4:23 a.m., Elena's legs barely held her as she climbed the stairs to her apartment building. She could barely see. Her hands were a map of blisters and burns. She had worked a double shift. She had saved a stranger's life. All she wanted was 1 hour of sleep. She pushed open her apartment door. 15 men stood in the hallway. Black suits, gold watches, the kind of stillness that comes from being trained to kill. Carlo stood at the front. Gino beside him. Behind them, a wall of muscle and danger. Elena's heart stopped. She stepped backward, pulling her door open, blocking the entrance with her body. "My son is inside," she said. Her voice did not shake this time. It had moved past fear into something harder. "Please. Whatever this is, whatever he did, he's just a child." Carlo's face shifted, gentle, almost kind. "Mrs. Morales, we're not here to hurt you. Vincent Vitoli sent us." The name fell like a stone into still water. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Everyone in Chicago whispered it in the dark. Vincent Vitoli was power made flesh. Vincent Vitoli was the reason people disappeared. Vincent Vitoli was a god walking through the city in tailored suits. "I didn't know," Elena started. "We know," Gino said. His voice was deep, measured, final. You saved our boss tonight. He wants to thank you. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Why would he? I'm nobody. No, Carlo said. You're not. He held up something that made Elena's knees go weak. The drawing. Oliver's drawing of a family that didn't exist. It must have fallen from her pocket when she pulled Vincent from the burning car. The man you pulled from that vehicle, Carlo continued, is Vincent Vitoli. The most dangerous man in Chicago. And the first thing he asked about was whoever drew this picture. He wanted to know if you were alive. He wanted to know if you were safe. Gino stepped forward slightly, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. Robert Hargrove has been dealt with. Completely. He was handed to the Castellano family 1 hour ago. They had questions about his property deals. He disappeared screaming into the November night. He will never bother you again. Elena's hand found the wall. The $47,000 you owe him, Carlo said. Gone. Your rent is paid for 2 years. Your utilities are covered. Your hospital bills, all of them, are settled. Vincent Vitoli does not leave debts unpaid. Why? Elena whispered. Why would he do this? I'm nobody. Carlo looked at her battered face, her trembling hands, her broken shoes held together with duct tape. You stood between armed men and a stranger. You pulled a burning man from a wreck with your bare hands. You refused to let a child be hurt even when the cost was your own blood. In our world, that makes you somebody. At 5:15 a.m., Vincent Vitoli arrived. His cologne preceded him, cedar and something darker, something expensive enough to smell like power. His footsteps were measured, unhurried, the walk of a man who had never needed to rush because the world rearranged itself around him. He was tall. Impossibly tall. His suit was charcoal with a white silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a chest marked with a thin white scar. A bandage covered his temple where the glass had cut him. His eyes were the color of a winter storm. One look from him, and grown men moved. His men straightened to attention. Elena had never seen power like this. It radiated from him like heat from a furnace. But Vincent's eyes moved past her. They found Oliver. The boy had woken at the sound of voices. He stood in the hallway in his Spider-Man pajamas, rubbing his eyes, his drawing pencil still clutched in his small fist. Vincent knelt slowly, and she saw him wince as his ribs shifted, still burning from the fire. Did you draw this? Vincent asked, his voice deep and solid like an oath. Oliver nodded, unable to look away. It's beautiful, Vincent said. What's your name? Oliver. Vincent studied the boy's face. His eyes. His jawline. The exact line of his mouth. Time seemed to stop. Carlo and Gino exchanged a look, one they had not seen on their boss's face in 15 years. Not since his brother died. How old are you, Oliver? 7. Vincent stood, moving slowly, keeping his eyes on the boy. He looked at Elena, and something shifted in his expression. Something broke open and bled. Step outside with me, he said. Not a request. Elena hesitated, but Carlo nodded reassuringly. We'll stay with Oliver. Go. The hallway was empty except for them. Vincent leaned against the wall, and even that small movement cost him. Rain fell outside the stairwell window, silver and relentless. Tell me about his father, Vincent said. Elena's face closed like a door slamming. He's not in the picture. His name. Why does it matter? Because I think I knew him. And I think Oliver is family. The truth came out in fragments, broken pieces from a past she had buried so deep she almost believed it didn't exist. Oliver's father was Antonio Vitoli, Vincent's younger brother. They had been together for 3 months before Antonio died in a car accident. She was pregnant. Antonio never knew. She never contacted the family because Antonio had made her promise to stay away. The Vitoli world was too dangerous for a child. 7 years of raising him alone. 3 jobs. No sleep. No safety. No one. Vincent listened without moving. When she finished, his hand was shaking. "My brother's son," he said. "My nephew." "You don't have to," Elena whispered. "We don't need anything. I just want Oliver safe. He's a Vitali. He'll never want for anything again." But then Vincent's expression shifted, confusion, something deeper, something that cut like a blade. "He's been drawing pictures of you and a man for months," Vincent said. "A man with dark hair. My men showed them to me weeks ago." They thought. He trailed off. Elena pulled out the newest drawing with shaking fingers. A family. A woman, a man, and a child holding hands. She had never noticed before, but the man looked exactly like the one standing in front of her. "He's seen you," Elena realized. "He's seen you somewhere." Vincent nodded slowly. "Outside his school 3 months ago. In the hospital waiting room when he had a fever. He's been drawing me since then. Not knowing, just seeing, and drawing, and needing." At 6:45 a.m., they returned to Elena's apartment. Oliver ran immediately to Vincent and grabbed his hand without hesitation or fear. "Are you staying?" the boy asked. Vincent looked at Elena, saw her terror, saw her hope, saw them warring inside her like 2 animals fighting for control. He knelt to Oliver's eye level. "Would you like me to?" Oliver nodded with the fierce certainty of a child who had been waiting his whole life for someone to ask that question. "Then I'm staying," Vincent said. His phone rang at 7:53 a.m. Elena heard his voice change, something sharp entering it, something cold. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Oliver show Vincent his drawings, watching the most dangerous man in Chicago kneel on her threadbare carpet and listen to a 7-year-old boy explain the colors he used for happy days versus sad days. "I won't be there, Evelyn," Vincent said into the phone. His jaw tightened. "No. Not today." A woman's voice, sharp and insistent, came through the speaker. "Evelyn Blackwell. Old money, older cruelty, someone accustomed to getting everything she wanted." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "Where else would you possibly be?" Vincent looked at Elena and Oliver. At the small family forming in a 1-room apartment in Chicago's poorest neighborhood. "With family," he said, and hung up. But what Elena didn't know was that Evelyn Blackwell had spent 20 years destroying anyone who stood between her and what she wanted. And she was already making calls. The November rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite, each drop a tiny percussion strike in the vast silence. Elena stood on the balcony 40 stories above Chicago, her borrowed clothes soaked through, her fingers gripping the marble railing like it was the only solid thing left in a dissolving world. Below, the city glittered indifferent, millions of lights, millions of lives, none of them hers. Inside the suite, Oliver slept in a bed that cost more than 3 months of her rent. Egyptian cotton sheets, a down comforter, a room designed for people who belonged in places like this. Not for a 7-year-old boy whose mother worked the graveyard shift at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. She thought about Robert Hargrove's body. Found at 6:17 p.m. in a warehouse on the city's south side, the police officer had said. Tortured. Dumped. The Castellano family's calling card. She knew what that meant. She knew exactly what it meant because Vincent Vitali had done it. For her. To protect her. To erase the man who had cornered her in a storage room and left handprints on her throat like a signature of ownership. The violence she had stepped into was not theoretical. It was real. It was bodies in warehouses. It was FBI agents moving through Chicago with federal warrants. It was Evelyn Blackwell's voice, sharp as a blade wrapped in ice, echoing in the marble lobby of this hotel where Elena didn't belong. So you're the waitress, Evelyn had said. The platinum blonde woman had approached like a general surveying defeated territory, her Chanel suit the color of winter, her diamonds catching the afternoon light and throwing it back in sharp, cruel angles. 2 other women flanked her, the kind of women who measured other women and found them wanting. Elena's face had burned. Excuse me. The one who thinks she can climb into Vincent's bed by using a child. It's clever, I'll give you that. Evelyn's smile never reached her eyes. Those eyes were the color of frozen water, empty, merciless, calculating. It's not like that. Of course it is. You saw an opportunity and you took it. A poor little waitress with a convenient story about a dead brother. You probably aren't even the mother. Elena had stepped forward then, her hands clenched into fists. Oliver is my son. Evelyn had laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Then prove it. DNA test. Let's see if this fantasy holds up. Antonio was Oliver's father. I don't need to prove anything to you. The smile had vanished. Evelyn's face had transformed into something sharp and dangerous. You're nothing. You work in a diner. You wear orthopedic shoes. You think Vincent Vitoli will choose you over me? Over his world? You're a charity case, sweetheart. Enjoy it while it lasts. Then she had turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown timer. The words had carved themselves into Elena's chest like scars. Not because they were cruel, devastatingly so, but because they were true. She was nothing. She was a waitress. She was wearing orthopedic shoes because her feet, after 9-hour shifts, couldn't bear another day of regular shoes. She was a charity case. A temporary fixture in Vincent Vitoli's world, a problem he was solving the only way his world knew how, with violence, with erasure, with the kind of justice that left bodies in warehouses. Oliver deserved better. He deserved a mother who didn't drag him into mob wars. He deserved a life without federal agents and body counts and women like Evelyn Blackwell measuring his worth in designer logos and bloodline. The rain intensified. Cold droplets mixed with her tears, she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Her hand shook on the railing. She could pack tonight. She could take Oliver, disappear to another city. Phoenix. Denver. Somewhere small where nobody knew the Vitoli name. Vincent would eventually forget them. It would be safer. Cleaner. It would be the right thing to do. She was reaching for the door when she felt it, a small hand slipping into hers, warm despite the November cold. Oliver stood there in his Spider-Man pajamas, his hair sticking up at odd angles, his feet bare on the wet balcony. Water dripped from his nose. "Mama, why are you sad?" His voice was so small. So certain that sadness was something a mother should never feel alone. Elena knelt, pulling him against her chest. "I'm not sad, baby." "You're lying." "But it's okay. He'll fix it." Oliver pointed inside with the casual confidence of a child who had learned, in his 7 years, that grown-ups with power fix things. Vincent stood in the penthouse doorway, silhouetted against the interior light, still wearing his suit from a business meeting. Rain dripped from his dark hair, running down the sharp line of his jaw. His hands hung at his sides, empty of weapons, empty of threat. Just hands. Just a man who had been watching them through the glass. Their eyes met across the balcony, and something in his expression stopped Elena from running. Not possession. Not pity. Understanding. He had been where she was, drowning, broken, ready to surrender. She saw it in the set of his shoulders, in the weight he carried like a second skin. He walked onto the balcony slowly, deliberately, and knelt beside them both. The rain soaked through his designer suit without him seeming to notice. He took Oliver's other hand, the child immediately leaning against him with the trust of someone who had never been failed by this man. Vincent said nothing. He just stayed. The three of them in the November rain, holding on, forming a shape that looked almost like a family. At midnight, Vincent made one phone call. "Carlo. Evelyn Blackwell. I want everything. Financial records, property transfers, social connections. Everything. Bring it to me by dawn." He hung up without waiting for a response. Carlo had worked for Vincent Vitoli for 14 years. In that time, he had burned down businesses, erased witnesses, moved money through channels so complicated they existed in dimensions other people didn't know were real. But he had never heard his boss's voice sound like this, cold, yes, but underneath the cold was something else. Protection. Not the kind that destroyed. The kind that built fortresses. By 3:13 a.m., Carlo and 12 men moved through Chicago like ghosts. They pulled financial records from Evelyn's private accountant. They interviewed her staff, frightened people who revealed, with almost guilty relief, years of watching her siphon funds into untraceable accounts. They tracked her property flips, her zoning variances, her carefully orchestrated scandals. They found it all. 6 years. $2.3 million redirected from the Blackwell Family Foundation to accounts in the Caymans. A pattern of bribing city officials. Property schemes that had destroyed neighborhoods. And underneath it all, a more vicious pattern for women whose reputation she had systematically dismantled with manufactured scandals, false testimony, doctored photographs. For women who had made the mistake of being beautiful or ambitious or in her way. By 7:45 a.m., FBI agents were moving through the Gold Coast neighborhood. Black SUVs pulled up to Evelyn's mansion, a stone palace worth $15 million. Neighbors watched from their windows as 12 federal agents in windbreakers moved across the manicured lawn. The lead agent, a woman with gray eyes and a federal badge, rang the doorbell at 8:03 a.m. Evelyn answered in silk pajamas the color of champagne. Her platinum hair was arranged perfectly, even at this hour. Even when she saw the badges, she smiled, a reflex, a weapon she had used her entire life. Evelyn Blackwell, you're under arrest for wire fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering connected to fraudulent property schemes and embezzlement of charitable funds. The agent's voice was neutral, professional, the voice of a system that had finally caught up. Evelyn's smile froze. Her hand moved toward the doorframe as if she could somehow seal herself inside her own world. This is ridiculous. My lawyers will. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They handcuffed her on her marble steps while neighbors watched from their windows. The same woman who had walked through the hotel lobby with such certainty now stumbled, her champagne silk pajamas catching the dawn light. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Screams at first, denials, threats, promises of legal annihilation. Then, as they loaded her into the black SUV, just tears. The kind of tears that came too late. Federal prison. 40 years recommended. Her family issued a statement disowning her by noon. Every society door in Chicago slammed shut simultaneously, like a system of locks engaging. At 9:15 a.m., Vincent visited Elena's hotel room. Oliver was at the pool with Gino, who had been assigned the task of watching the boy with the seriousness of a man guarding a nuclear facility. Vincent carried a folder. His suit was dry now, but his hair still held the memory of rain. Elena sat on the edge of the bed. She had not slept. She had watched dawn break over Chicago and felt something fragile inside her that might have been hope or might have been terror. They felt identical at this hour. Evelyn won't bother you again, Vincent said. He slid the folder across the table between them. Neither will anyone else. Elena opened it with shaking hands. Financial documents. Arrest warrants. Evidence of embezzlement, corruption, fraud. The systematic destruction of Evelyn Blackwell, documented in precise detail. You did this for me. Her voice was barely a whisper. I did this for my family. Vincent sat across from her, leaving space between them, an act of restraint that somehow felt more intimate than proximity. Your family now. Both of you. We're not. Oliver is my nephew. My blood. That makes you family. He paused, and something vulnerable crossed his face, a crack in the fortress. But I need you to know this isn't obligation. It's not payment for something you did. When I see you with him, when I see how you've protected him, how you've sacrificed everything for him, he stopped. Started again. My brother died before he even knew he had a son. You gave Oliver everything. You gave him love. You gave him courage. I watched you stand between armed men and a stranger. I watched you pull a burning man from a burning car. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Elena. Not because you don't feel fear, but because you move toward danger when everyone else runs. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I'm terrified of you. Of this world. Good. His voice was like thunder, deep and solid. You should be. It's dangerous. It's violent. But I can keep you safe. Both of you. If you'll let me. Why? The question hung between them like a prayer. Vincent reached across the table, stopping just before touching her hand, a question asked in gesture. Because Oliver drew a picture of us as a family. And I think he saw something we didn't. I think he knew before we did. Elena looked at their hands, almost touching across the wooden table. Knew what? That some families aren't born. They're chosen. In moments when darkness meets light. Elena closed the distance. She took his hand. Her fingers fit against his palm like they had always belonged there, like they were following a map only her body understood. Oliver's drawing sat between them on the table, the three of them, together, rendered in careful crayon strokes in colors marked for happy days. Outside, Chicago moved forward without knowing that something fundamental had shifted on the 42nd floor of a hotel downtown. A waitress who had counted $5 in desperation. A mafia boss who had learned that some things were worth more than empires. A boy who had drawn the future into existence with the certainty of a child who had always believed in happy endings. The rain had stopped. Somewhere in the city, the sun was breaking through. 3 months had passed since the November night when Vincent Vitoli walked into Rose's diner and everything changed. Elena stood in the marble foyer of his penthouse on the 42nd floor, still half expecting to wake up and find herself back in that cramped studio apartment with the leaking ceiling. But the Italian marble beneath her feet was real. The view of Chicago sprawling below the floor-to-ceiling windows was real. The sound of Oliver's laughter echoing from down the hallway was real. "Mama, come see what Papa did." Oliver's voice cracked with excitement, carrying that particular pitch he used only for Vincent now. Elena moved toward his bedroom, her new Italian leather shoe silent on the hardwood. Vincent had insisted on replacing her orthopedic ones 3 weeks after she moved in. She'd kept the old pair in the bottom of her closet, a reminder of who she used to be, a talisman against forgetting. Oliver sat cross-legged on his bed, surrounded by drawings. Vincent knelt beside him, his tailored shirt sleeves rolled up, a pencil behind his ear. He looked nothing like the man who ran Chicago's underworld. He looked like someone's father. He looked like hers. Uncle Gino helped Papa bring the ponies, Oliver explained, pointing to stick figures that barely resembled horses. There were 40 kids at the museum. 40! And I got to pick the animals. His 8th birthday party 3 weeks ago had been the moment everything solidified. Vincent had rented the entire children's museum for the afternoon. Ponies and magicians and a cake shaped like a castle. Carlo and Gino had worn party hats, ridiculous, oversized things that made them look simultaneously absurd and lethal. She remembered watching Vincent kneel beside Oliver to help him blow out the candles, the boy's face tilted up in pure adoration. That was when Elena understood she wasn't rebuilding her life anymore. She was building something entirely new. "Your mother taught me that the best part of being family isn't the fancy parties," Vincent said, his voice carrying that strange gentleness that still startled her lieutenants. "It's the quiet moments. Like this." Elena stood in the doorway, watching them. Vincent caught her eye. The look between them was no longer uncertain, it was inevitability, just waiting for the right moment. She felt her chest tighten. That evening, after Oliver was asleep, Elena found Vincent in his study. Rain tapped against the windows, November rain, relentless and cold. The study was all dark wood and leather, books with gold-embossed spines that cost more than her old rent. He poured her wine in crystal that cost more than her old car, though she'd learned not to calculate those comparisons anymore. "You've given us everything," Elena said, sitting across from him. "A home. Security. Stability. I don't know how to repay." "I don't want repayment." Vincent set down his glass. His jaw tightened slightly. "I want—" He stopped. The Mafia boss who commanded hundreds looked uncharacteristically uncertain, searching for words like a man navigating unfamiliar territory. Elena set down her own glass. "What do you want, Vincent?" He looked at her, really looked. Not at the waitress who worked crossword puzzles with Oliver every morning, though she was that. Not at the woman who still wore her orthopedic shoes around the penthouse because they were comfortable, though she did that too. He looked at the woman who stood up to his men when they tracked mud on the carpet, who cried at Oliver's school plays, who had chosen a stranger over her own safety because she understood something about courage that men like Vincent had spent their whole lives learning. "I want what Oliver already knows. What he's been drawing for months." Vincent reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a worn piece of paper. It was the original drawing, the one that had fallen from her apron pocket the night of the fire. The one that showed 3 figures rendered in careful crayon strokes, with colors marked for happy days and sad days. "He saw us before we saw ourselves," Vincent said quietly. Elena stood, walked to him. "I'm still scared." "Of me?" "Of losing this. Of waking up and finding it was all a dream. That I'm back in that apartment, counting $5, and none of this was real." Vincent rose slowly, his hands finding her face with the careful precision of a man handling something precious. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "I'm the most dangerous man in this city. I've built an empire on fear and violence. I've done things that would—" He stopped. "But when I'm with you and Oliver, I remember what my brother saw in you. What Oliver sees. Light. Hope. Something that makes the darkness bearable." He kissed her forehead, lingering there. "You're not losing this," he said. "You're stuck with us." Elena laughed through sudden tears. "Us?" Oliver's small voice came from the doorway. "Are you kissing Mama?" They sprang apart like teenagers. Oliver stood there in his Spider-Man pajamas, grinning, holding a piece of paper in his hand. "Again? You're always kissing now. It's gross." He walked over and handed the drawing to Vincent. "But I drew it right this time." The new drawing showed the 3 of them, but this time Elena and Vincent were holding hands. Above them, in letters that were still learning their shapes, family. "I told everyone at school you're my papa," Oliver said matter-of-factly. "I already told them." Vincent knelt, and the boy threw his arms around his neck. When Vincent looked up over Oliver's shoulder, Elena saw something break open in his eyes, the thaw of a man who had learned to feel again. "Is it okay?" Oliver asked. "That I told them." "It's more than okay," Vincent said. His voice came out rough, thick. "But I need to ask you something important." Oliver pulled back, suddenly serious in the way children can be. "What?" "I'd like to ask your mama to stay with us. Forever. As a real family. Not just visiting. As our family." The question hung in the air like a prayer. Oliver's eyes went wide, and then he launched himself at Vincent, nearly knocking him backward. "Yes. Yes. I want that. Yes." Elena was crying now, nodding, unable to speak. Vincent reached out and pulled her down, and for a moment the 3 of them existed in their own small universe, separate from Chicago and darkness and danger. That night, Elena found a small velvet box on her pillow. Inside was a key, simple, elegant, its brass worn smooth. The note beside it was in Vincent's handwriting, the letters precise and deliberate. "This was always yours. From the moment you chose courage over safety. From the moment Oliver drew us together. Welcome home. V." She found him in his study, staring at Oliver's drawings covering his desk. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him. He took her hand without looking away from the drawings. They sat in silence, listening to the November rain, knowing that two broken people and one hopeful child had built something neither expected, a family chosen in the darkness, held together by light. 6 months later, Elena stood in Rose's diner at 3 in the afternoon. The checkered floor was polished now, the neon sign working. Jerry had retired with a generous pension, Vincent's doing, though Vincent would never mention it. She wore a simple dress, not a uniform. The old orthopedic shoes were gone, replaced by Italian leather, but she kept them in her closet at home. Oliver sat in a booth, homework spread across the table. Vincent arrived in his black SUV, replaced months ago. He walked through the door, and Elena remembered the first time she saw him, unconscious, bleeding, dying on the pavement. Now he was alive, whole, hers. He kissed her forehead, ruffled Oliver's hair. The boy looked up, beaming. "Papa, I got an A on my family tree project." He showed them a drawing of the three of them, with branches extending outward to Carlo and Gino labeled as uncles, to the building downtown where Vincent's legitimate business operated now, to the foundation in Elena's name that helped women leaving abusive situations. Oliver had drawn them all as part of one interconnected family. Vincent studied it seriously. "This is the finest family tree I've ever seen." They sat together in the booth. Elena looked around the diner, at the woman she used to be reflected in the polished windows like a ghost. That woman had $547,000 in debt. That woman was beaten and bleeding. That woman wanted to give up. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked. "That I had nothing. And then I saved a stranger from a burning car." She looked at Oliver, then Vincent. "And everything changed." "You saved more than a stranger," Vincent said. "You saved a family that didn't know it was missing you." "Mama, tell the story again," Oliver said. "About the fire." Elena smiled. "You've heard it 100 times. But I like it. You were brave." Vincent reached across the table and took Elena's hand. "She's always brave. That's why we love her." The words landed like they were the first time, even though he'd said them every day since November. Elena's breath caught. She squeezed his hand. "I love you too," she whispered. "Both of you." Oliver grinned. "I know. I drew it in every picture." Outside, the rain continued to fall on Chicago, that relentless November rain that never quite left. But inside Rose's diner, 3 people who had been broken alone were whole together. They sat in the booth where everything had changed, drinking coffee that tasted like redemption, drawing new family portraits, building new memories to replace the old ones. And Elena understood finally that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.